WADR, promoting dialogue.
Good evening and many thanks for staying tuned to West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM and around the world on WADR.org. Welcome to Newslink, and here are the top stories. Guinea-Bissau President Embalo announces election for October and November. Nigerian army calls for good governance to solve insurgency amidst continued attacks.
We must have the backings of good governance. Good governance is important because most of these societies, when we get to these communities, a lot of them don't even know anything about government. You go there are no roads, no water, no electricity. And as long as we have poverty and hunger, these are tools that they use to bring them in.
The Gambian government reaffirms commitment to transitional justice as it prepares to implement TRRC recommendations.
16 out of the 263 recommendations have been fully implemented. 192 of the 263 recommendations are ongoing.
And in Senegal, financial prosecutors on the trail of more than 125 billion CFA francs in money laundering activities. Please stay tuned for details of the stories and more.
Here is Imo Edit with Newslink.
Many thanks for joining our broadcast. Let's begin in Guinea-Bissau, where President Umaru Sissoco Embalo has announced the general election to hold between October and November this year. The announcement is coming as his 5-year term draws to a close. The president also confirmed that parliamentary elections will be held this year. Abdullah Hassan has more details in this report.
President Umaru Sissoco Embalo has declared that his 5-year term will end on September 4. He affirmed that the presidential election will be held between October and November in accordance with the laws of the land. The elections must be held between October and November. This announcement was made during an address to the press in Bissau. The president also said that anyone who disagrees with the decision could appeal to the Supreme Court of Justice, noting that the clarification aims to ensure transparency and respect for electoral rules in the country. He also confirmed that the parliamentary elections will take place this year without giving specific details on the date. Recall, Embalo on November 4 officially postponed indefinitely legislative elections scheduled for November 24, 2024, prolonging the small country's political limbo. President Umaru Sissoco Embalo had previously set the November 24 date after dissolving parliament in December 2023 in response to armed clashes 3 days earlier, which he described as an attempted coup. Last November, the Minister of Territorial Administration warned that the vote was unlikely to go ahead in the face of logistical difficulties and a lack of money.
Abdullah Hassan filed that report. He'll talk in politics. Former Ivorian president and current leader of the African People's Party, Côte d'Ivoire PPACI, Laurent Gbagbo, over the weekend announced that once re-elected to the presidency, he undertakes to compensate all victims of the post-election crisis of 2010-2011. This announcement was made in Abidjan during the Assis de Femmes de Côte d'Ivoire, an event organized at the Palace de la Culture in Abidjan. He also expressed his compassion for the victims of this crisis. In another part, the former president advocated for the creation of a university and a teaching hospital in each region of Côte d'Ivoire. Gbagbo, who is yet to be included in the electoral register of the country, is hopeful and hence the continuation of the subtle campaign. As a reminder, the Ivorian post-election crisis of 2010-2011 caused over 3,000 deaths. Nigeria's Chief of Defense Staff, General Christopher Musa, has reiterated the critical role of good governance in the fight against insurgency, citing poverty, hunger, and lack of infrastructure as key enablers of extremist recruitment. Speaking in an interview on local media on Monday, Musa underscored the necessity of collaboration both locally and internationally to effectively combat Boko Haram and other non-state actors. He described dire conditions in many affected communities where residents lack access to basic amenities such as roads, water, and electricity.
For us to have a final solution, if there's anything like final, because there is never a situation where you say there is any community is crime-free, is that we must have the backings of good governance. Good governance is important because most of these societies, when we get to these communities, a lot of them don't even know anything about government. You go there are no roads, no water, no electricity. And as long as we have poverty and hunger, these are areas, these are tools that they use to bring them into the fold. And that's why they recruit quite easily. I can tell you on a weekly basis, we're taking them out as many as possible. But the more you do that, the assets they get from these other countries into Nigeria, movement of small arms and light weapons into Nigeria, movement of drugs. So it's a continuous, and that's why it's important that we must work together with our neighbors, because working with them makes sure that they block their own borders, and once they do that, these things don't get into Nigeria. So there's nothing wrong with the non-kinetic and the kinetic. It's important that we do that, because as you are fighting, you also have to show Nigerians that those you are protecting, that you are with them and you care about them. The issue of human rights, like I said, we've had several situations. I'm sure you remember the Reuters when they said that we had this 10,000 illegal abortions. After 1.5 years of investigation, it was found that it was just complete lies. And what we realized that anytime we're making inroad, anytime we're getting successes, these international organizations taking upon themselves to try and demoralize the country, malign Nigeria, demoralize our own troops. We have refused to be demoralized, and we will not be demoralized.
Responding to questions on the funding of the terrorist groups, Musa revealed effort to disrupt the financial lifelines sustaining Boko Haram, citing observations of hard currencies among insurgents during surrendering exercises. He pointed to international and local funding sources, including taxes, levies, and kidnapping as significant contributors to the operations.
It is a cause of concern, actually for them to have been able to sustain their operations for all this while. We're talking of 16 years. Like I said, during the surrendering exercise, we were able to see some of them with hard currencies, different denominations. Besides that, like I said, they have a lot of support coming from outside. Now, what we have done is that we have raised these observations. The Office of the National Security Advisor, the NFIU, the Central Bank, the NIA, the DSS have all moved into it. What we are also doing is that we have reached out to international community on the importance to trace the funds, trace the movement of the money. If we're able to do that, I'm sure we'll be able to, if we're able to take that out, we'll take the oxygen that keeps them going, which is very, very vital. It's a very dangerous and very high value organizations that we believe that be able to do that has made it difficult for them to be traced. So we're doing everything. And again, not only from the international, we know also, we have the belief that locally they also have the sources of funding, probably through taxes, levies, kidnapping, and so on. And that's why we're making all the efforts to ensure that we deny them ability to do that. But I can assure you the federal government has stepped in. We have reached into United Nations, the European Union, and all other international organizations to help assist in tracking the funds. I think it's important if we're able to do that, we'll be able to mitigate this issue.
That was Nigeria's Chief of Defense Staff General Christopher Musa speaking there.
More stories coming up on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
Well, still in Nigeria, Borno State says suspect Islamist militant killed 40 farmers in an attack on the Dumba community in the northeastern state on Sunday. A state official said the militants were believed to belong to the armed group Boko Haram and its offshoot, Islamic State West Africa province ISWAP, who have been waging a deadly insurgency in northeast Nigeria since 2009 that has displaced millions and killed thousands, with Borno as its epicenter. Osman Mero has more details in this report.
Sunday's attack comes amid worsening food crisis in Borno, exacerbated by flooding in September and years of insecurity and displacement caused by insurgency. Initial reports indicate the farmers strayed outside a security corridor set up by the military, venturing into an area for insurgent activity and strewn with landmines. Usman Tar, Commissioner of Information, said security forces were looking for any farmers who had escaped the attack. Tar added. Borno Governor Babagana Umar Zulum condemned the attack in a statement, calling on the military to track and deal decisively with the perpetrators. Boko Haram and ISWAP have stepped up attacks in Borno since the turn of the year, with a failed ambush on military patrol last week, leaving 34 militants dead. 6 soldiers were killed in action.
Osman Umar filed that report. In Niger, calls for the release of activist Musa Changari continue to grow. The Nigerian human rights defender was charged a week ago with intelligence with enemy powers undermining national defense and promoting terrorism. Now the editor has details from WDL's Niamey correspondent Murtala Zubairu.
After spending a month in police custody, Musa Changarai has been held for the past 10 days at the Filinge prison, located 180 kilometers from the capital, Niamey. The activist, who serves as the Secretary General of Alternative Espace Citoyen, a Nigerian civil society organization, is accused of collaborating with enemy powers, undermining national defense, and promoting terrorism. He had recently criticized the human rights situation in Niger since the military took over. Since his arrest on December 3, 2024, many have called for the release of the human rights defender. A representative of Transparency International Niger, a civil society organization fighting corruption, in defense of Musa Changarai, said he did not belong to the prison. According to him, Musa Changarai has devoted his whole life to defending the minorities and even taught human rights at the Nigerian police school. In a statement published before his indictment on January 3, civil society actors, academics, and unionists called for his release. In their statement, they condemned his arbitrary arrest and the violation of his freedom of expression.
Now the editor voiced a report filed in by our Niamey correspondent Murtala Zubairu. Away from the Sahel now, the Gambian government has reaffirmed its commitment to transitional justice, stepping up efforts to implement the recommendations of the Truth, Reconciliation and Reparations Commission, TRRC. To date, 16 recommendations have been fully implemented, with over 190 out of 263 currently in progress. This renewed momentum follows ECOWAS' approval of a special tribunal, a decision championed by President Adama Barrow after leading the campaign among his colleagues head of state. From Banjo, Sankule Janko report.
The implementation of over 190 out of 263 recommendations made by the Gambia's Truth, Reconciliation and Reparations Commission, TRRC, is underway, with some already fully implemented. This was disclosed by Ida Pearson, Special Advisor on post-TRRC matters at the Ministry of Justice.
16 out of the 263 recommendations have been fully implemented. 192 of the 263 recommendations are ongoing.
Ms. Pearson acknowledged the government's progress in implementing the recommendations, but urged patience, citing inherently slow nature of the process.
We'll do our best to really implement as quickly as we can by 2027, but in reality, this is also a long-term process. We should allow the process to also take its course.
Concerns about the political will to fully implement the TRRC recommendations have been raised over the years. Addressing these concerns during a town hall meeting, Attorney General and Minister of Justice Dauda Ejalo reaffirmed the government's commitment to the transitional justice process. The Justice Minister emphasized that President Adama Barrow has never interfered in their work. He highlighted the President's advocacy efforts, particularly in championing the campaign for ECOWAS's approval of a special tribunal for the Gambia after an initial rejection by the ECOWAS Parliament.
He is giving us all the support. One of the evidence of that support is just the recently approved establishment of the special court. The President was in the forefront of the campaign. He was calling his colleague heads of state. He was meeting with them and ensuring that he galvanized all the necessary support to ensure that that issue goes through.
Following ECOWAS heads of state's approval of a special tribunal in December 2024, the Gambia will work closely with the regional body to prosecute perpetrators, including former President Yahya Jammeh, for human rights violations committed in the country from July 1994 to January 2017. For Newslink in West Africa, the Democracy Radio, I'm Sankule Janko reporting from Banjul.
Mali's government has begun enforcing a provisional order to seize gold stock at Barrick Gold's Lulo-Gunkoto site. The Canadian miner said in a note to Malian staff, warning against that it may have to suspend operations at the complex. The move suggests that Mali's military-led authorities are not ready to back down in the standoff over a contract based on new mining rules as they push for a greater share of revenues from Western miners. Christopher Teacher completes the story.
Barrick has not said what volume of gold is at risk, but one of the employees said Lulo-Gunkoto's stock was around 4 metric tons, citing internal estimates. This amount is nearly $380 million based on spot gold prices on Monday. Responding to a request for comments, Barrick said it had nothing to add beyond what it said in a January 6 statement. In that statement, the world's second biggest gold miner by volume had warned that it would have to suspend operations at Loulo-Goungoto temporarily if restrictions on its gold shipment were not lifted within the week. The threat remains on the table. In Sunday's note to staff, Barrick said if the situation is not resolved quickly, it may be forced to follow through on the suspension. The Malian authorities did not immediately respond when asked to comment. Loulo-Goungoto accounts for around 14% of Barrick's 2025 estimate gold output. Meanwhile, gold is Mali's top foreign currency earner, accounting for more than 80% of total export in 2023. Military government in Mali, Burkina Faso and Niger are all trying to renegotiate terms to regain a bigger share of mining revenues after a series of coups that have seen them shift away from their traditional backers, France, the United States and the United Nations, towards Russia and elsewhere.
Christopher Ticho filed that report. You're listening to Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, 94.9 FM Dakar, and our partner stations across the sub-region. Here is a reminder of our top stories. Guinea-Bissau President Embalo announces election for October and November. Nigerian army calls for good governance to solve insurgency amidst continued attacks. The Gambian government reaffirms commitment to transitional justice as it prepares to implement TRRC recommendations. And still ahead in the news, in Senegal, financial prosecutors on a trail of more than 125 billion francs in money laundering activities. We don't have a guest interview and sports news. Please stay with us.
West Africa Democracy Radio. It's you speaking.
Well, don't forget we are streaming live on wadr.org, YouTube and Facebook. Now let's bring you some stories from Senegal. Prime Minister Ousmane Sonko arrived Nouakchott on Sunday for a 3-day visit aimed at strengthening economic and diplomatic cooperation between Mauritania and Senegal. He was welcomed at Tunis International Airport by his Mauritanian counterpart Mokhtar Ould-Diaye. The visit comes amid growing economic cooperation between the two countries, particularly in the energy sector. BP, together with its partners, recently launched a multi-million-dollar social investment program in both countries aimed at improving local quality of life and creating long-term growth opportunities. The program focuses on community health, economic development, environmental awareness, and education. An apprentice training program has also been set up to prepare for future offshore operations, with 47 technicians currently in training. Still in Senegal, the Public Prosecutor's Office of the Judicial Financial Pool suspect money laundering activities estimated at more than 100 billion CFA francs. The court announces the imminent opening of a judicial inquiry as part of a vast investigation. According to the Minister of Justice, reports that are currently being processed pinpoint several personalities for alleged acts of criminal association, money laundering, corruption, among others. Francis Boniface completes the story.
The announcement was made in a press release published on Sunday evening. According to the Public Prosecutor's Office, the Judicial Pool will soon open a wide-ranging investigation, noting that the jurisdiction suspects money laundering activities, provisional value of which is estimated at more than 125 billion CFA francs. In the note, the court says it has been notified of several reports by the National Financial Information Processing Unit, CENTIF. According to the Public Prosecutor's Office, the case highlights serious facts involving several individuals, including, among other things, alleged acts of criminal association, money laundering, fraud involving public funds, corruption, influence peddling, and misuse of corporate assets. According to the document, sophisticated money laundering mechanisms were adopted in order to conceal the origin of the funds involved. The Financial Judicial Pool was created in August 2023 to replace the CREI, the Court for the Repression of Illicit Enrichment. This jurisdiction, established within the Dakar High Court, aims to prosecute offences of an economic and financial nature.
Francis Boniface filed that report. The Senegalese government is moving to regulate the operation of motorcycle taxis, popularly known as chak-chak. The Minister of Land Transport has issued a 3-month deadline for riders to register their motorcycles with the Mines Department in Dakar. To complete the process, riders must provide a certificate of circulation, a validated sales document which has drawn controversy, and a copy of the seller's ID or passport. The total cost of the registration is capped at 28,000 CFA francs. These requirements have sparked significant backlash among motorcyclists, many of whom view the regulations as an attempt to stifle their livelihoods. Protests have erupted in several regions, with riders demanding the withdrawal of these measures. Despite the dissent, some riders have already complied, receiving license plates and legal documents to continue operating. Echatiso completes the story.
El Haj, a young motorcycle taxi driver, is on his second trip of the day. Navigating the streets of Parcelles Assainis under the blazing sun, he has recently submitted his registration documents to the Mines Department. Helmet securely fastened, El Haj acknowledges his initial criticism of the new rules aimed at formalizing the motorcycle taxi sector. He still considers the registration fee too high and a 3-month deadline too short.
We are very tired. We only earn 5,000 to 6,000 CFA francs a day. If traffic officers stop us, we give them what we have and sit idle. There are also daily household expenses to consider. The authorities really need to lower the fees.
Papi, another rider, has yet to submit his documents. Wearing a jacket to guard against the heat, the man in his 30s worries about potential police harassment during the grace period.
I'm not against the 3-month deadline, but they should stop the arrest on the road. That way, we can submit our documents without any trouble.
However, not all motorcyclists oppose the measures. Ibrahima, for instance, has completed his registration and has already received his license plate.
I don't see any issue with it. When I heard the news, I went to get my registration done. Now I'm fully compliant, even though I've only been in this business for 6 months. Others should submit their documents. It's better for them.
Motorcycle taxis continue to flood urban centers, competing with public transport. However, they are frequently criticized for contributing to bad safety issues, including accidents and instances of crime.
Echatiso with the details of Muzaffar Jakute's report.
Politics, analysis on major news, social matters, and all. This is A Guest.
Our guest interview segment this evening takes us back to Nigeria, where at least 16 people, including local vigilantes and residents, were killed in an airstrike by the Nigerian Air Force NAF in Tungakara, Maradun local government area of Zamfara State, northwestern region of the country. Eyewitnesses reported the airstrike occurred shortly after armed bandits raided the area and fled. Damilari Ebenezer is a Nigerian security expert who speaks about the situation.
There is no such thing as a clean war where there is no collateral damage, especially if you decide to use area assets to suppress the enemy. There are going to be collateral damage. As the senior Nigerian military officials recently said, we have passed a situation where we can pretend that there were not going to be collateral damage. The communique of the Nigerian Air Force is how to minimize that in a subsequent airstrike. But we have to be realistic. When you decide to launch a strike, you're likely going to kill the terrorist or the bandit, but you also are going to hit some of the innocent that are in the vicinity. It's regrettable, but this is the situation where we are now in the country today.
Mr. Ebenezer, this tragedy adds to a series of accidental airstrikes in Nigeria, including some part of December 2023 bombing in Sokoto State that killed dozens of people. Going back to 2017 airstrike that also displaced persons in camps. Does it mean that the Nigerian armed forces doesn't have control in terms of its attack towards bandits?
Oh, no, clearly they got very credible intelligence that the bandits were in those places before the army conducted the airstrike. There is no such thing as a clean airstrike in military, especially when you are targeting areas where civilians are also living. So there are two possibilities. Is it that the army decide not to intervene, and sometime in case, I guess the decision to strike was because they identify high value targets in those places, and the army had the options are bad, really. If you get to a point where you have to launch an airstrike on your own territory, we should move away from the belief that the army is able to do that while sparing the civilian.
Does this mean that the Nigerian armed forces is losing the battle against bandits when it comes to fighting via the land?
No. We're not in that situation. The situation in the north is not that. And in fact, that is why the army chose the option of airstrike. These are mobile bandit groups that are not ready to confront the army in a conventional warfare where you have one army against the enemy. They are mobile, and the only way you can surprise them is to be able to intervene and strike even when they are on the run. Unfortunately, they have decided to use the civilian as a way of protecting themselves against such attack. This is what we are dealing with here now.
Damilare Beneza is a Nigerian security expert. Well, here is Sankule Janko with Sport News.
Hello there, a warm welcome and thank you for joining us. The penultimate round of the CAF Champions League saw thrilling encounters across all groups over the weekend, with quarterfinal spots secured and intense battles setting up dramatic final match scenarios. Reigning champions Al Ahly advanced to the quarterfinals of the CAF Champions League with a 3-1 victory over Stade Abidjan in Côte d'Ivoire. Forward Imam Ashour's hat-trick was enough to secure qualification for the Egyptian Giants. The group's top spot will be decided when Pirates face Al Ahly in Cairo on the final match day. Meanwhile, Orlando Pirates defeated CR Belouizdad 2-1 to top Group C with 11 points and reached the quarterfinals. Esperance Tunis and Pyramids FC confirmed their places in the quarterfinals with narrow wins. Esperance beat Malian side Joliba 1-0, while Pyramids edged Sagrada with the same scoreline. FAR Rabat and Mamelodi Sundowns booked their quarter-final places from Group B. FAR Rabat held Raja Casablanca to a 1-1 draw, while Sundowns defeated Miniama Union 2-1 in a dramatic encounter. Matchday 5 results are as follows in Group A: MC Alger 1, TP Mazembe 0, Al Hilal 0, Young Africans 1. In Group B, Maniama 1, Mamelodi Sundowns 2, FAR Rabat 1, Raja Casablanca 1. In Group C, Orlando Pirates were 2-1 winners against CR Belouizdad, while Stade Abidjan were defeated 3-1 by Al Ahly. In Group D, Esperance Tunis 1, Joliba 0, Sagrada 0, and Pyramids 1. And that's it for sports. It's back to you.
Sankle Danko there with Sport News. And that's it on this edition of Newslink from West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. Thank you for listening. And many thanks to Maldo Juf, Umu Yarnogo, and Sheikh Jai for the technical assistance. Well, let's connect on our social media platforms: X, formerly Twitter, Instagram at WDR News, and Facebook West Africa Democracy Radio English Service. Coming up at the bottom of the hour is our flagship health program, Well Buddy. I am Imo Edit. Good evening.
And many thanks to you for listening to Newslink via Hot 104.3 FM, New Me FM 94.0,
Hilltop Radio 104.0.